Today's lesson is body facts or fake news. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to continue talking about some myths regarding the human body. People believe things about the body that aren't necessarily true. Well, in fact, they aren't true at all. We do, of course, know a lot about the human body, but there are some things that we don't know, and therefore a lot of false information is out there. People circulate that information so often that people begin to think it's actually true. Now, the first one we talked about last time was you can catch up on your sleep, and that's not actually true, is it, Helen?
No, it isn't true because our bodies simply don't function that way. We can't make up for our lack of sleep during the week by sleeping a lot on the weekends. We just need to maintain a consistent sleeping schedule, and that's how we can stay healthy.
Right, so try to get enough sleep every night, everybody. Don't think you can make up for it on the weekend. And the other myth we talked about was chewing gum. And, of course, not everybody chews gum, but sometimes, of course, if you do, you might accidentally swallow it, and you might go, oh my goodness, the gum is going to stay in my body for 7 years. It's going to take that long to digest it, but that's not actually true. The body can't digest it at all, and it will get passed out of your body rather quickly.
Right, so these are two myths regarding our health, regarding our bodies that we've looked at, and today we're going to look at some other ones, and the first one is related to our senses. We normally believe that we have 5 senses, but there are people who say that, nope, actually we have more than 5.
So let's find out what this is all about. How many senses do we actually have? Let's listen to the first part of our lesson right now.
We have only 5 senses: sight, taste, smell, touch, and hearing. But what about balance? Or your ability to feel heat and pain? Are these not also senses? Some scientists calculate that we have 9 senses, others say 21, still others make it 53. It all depends on how you define sense. Whatever definition is used, however, there are definitely more than 5.
So normally, most people believe that we have only 5 senses, and they are sight, taste, smell, touch, and hearing. But what about balance or your ability to feel heat and pain? Are these not also senses? So we are raising some questions about what senses actually mean. Do we mean that they are related only to those traditional 5 senses that we are familiar with? What about some other ways that we are able to sense our environment and orient ourselves with the world around us?
Right. So, of course, most people believe that we only have 5 senses: sight, taste, smell, touch, and hearing. Of course, now you're using your sense of hearing to hear us in this program. And if you're following along in the magazine, you're using your sense of sight. And, you know, maybe you actually smell the magazine and maybe you stick your tongue out and lick it or something like that. So, of course, then you're using smell and taste. And touching it, too, of course, when you turn the pages, you're feeling the paper there. So, yes, indeed, all of your 5 senses are engaged for our lesson, although I doubt you're actually licking the magazine. That would be silly, but I just use that as an example. But in any case, we've got some other senses that we might possibly consider as our senses. So what about balance? Okay, so yeah, we need balance if we're going to walk. Otherwise, we're going to fall down. And when we were kids learning how to ride a bicycle, of course, we had to develop our sense of balance then as well. Is that a sense too?
Right. And there's also the question of our ability to feel heat and pain, because we can feel heat and pain without actually touching something. So they're not actually related to the sense of touch, because we don't need to have our skin against the surface to be able to feel heat and pain. They are just things that we feel when we are near sources of heat or near something that might cause pain for us. So are these not also senses too? Now, that's a rhetorical question. We're not actually asking people to answer this question, but it raises the question of whether these can be considered senses or not.
Yeah, you could say, aren't these senses too? It makes sense. So we should consider those senses. Although maybe some people would say, well, feeling heat and feeling pain is part of feeling. But maybe some people think, well, it's not quite the same thing. When we touch something, we don't really feel whether it hurts us or not, or we don't really feel if it's hot or cold. So maybe these are other senses as well, the ability to feel heat or sense heat and to sense pain. And some scientists calculate that we have 9 senses. Others say 21. Still others make it 53. So it depends on who you talk to. Of course, some scientists will calculate or figure that we have 9 or 21 or 53. And here we've got the word calculate, which has to do with determining a number. If you're studying mathematics, you will need to calculate a formula. You'll have some figures and you'll have a formula, and then you'll calculate the numbers with a formula to arrive at your answer.
Right, and here we also have the pattern some, others, and still others. And this pattern just refers to the fact that there are multiple views or multiple groups or parties or individuals related to what we are talking about. So I could also say, for instance, some like the color blue, others like red, still others prefer green. And here we're talking about scientists and different scientists or group of scientists that have different opinions about how many senses we have. Some say 9, others say 21, and still others say 53.
Yep, it depends on how you define sense. So yeah, what exactly is a sense? The ability to sense the outside world using different ways, using different methods. Yes, of course, as we said, there are 5 conventional senses: sight, sound, hearing, touch, etc. But others say there are more senses than that. Whatever definition is used, however, there are definitely more than 5. So yes, indeed, it could be argued that 5 is a limiting number. There are more, so that's the myth here, that we only have 5 senses. There are other ways in which we sense the world around us. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's move on and talk about another myth regarding the body, how much of the brain we actually use.
We use only 10% of our brain. It's a conceit that has been used as the basis for several science fiction movies. Imagine the amazing things we could do if we could unlock the other 90%. But brain scans clearly show that pretty much the entire brain is active even during basic activities, such as talking and listening to music. The only time the brain isn't fully firing is when it has suffered damage.
大家好，第二部分我们看到单字 conceit， 这个字是可数名词，指巧妙的比喻。例如 The author's conceit is very unique in a way that I haven't seen before. 这位作者巧妙的比喻非常特别，我以前没有看过。或是 The lyrics are catchy and full of conceit. 这个歌词的比喻别出心裁且朗朗上口。另外，这个字当不可数名词用时，有自负或是自大的意思，像是 Conceit is the biggest weakness of that candidate. 自大是那位候选人最大的弱点。也可以说 I can't get along with her because of her conceit. 我跟她合不来，因为她很自大。再来，我们看到动词 unlock， 指解开、释放或是开启、打开，而字首 un 表示不或是无，像是Linguists unlocked the secrets of the ancient manuscript. 语言学家解开了古经文的秘密。或是 This new discovery has unlocked a number of opportunities for mankind. 这项新发现为人类开启了许多机会。另外补充2个以 un 为字首的动词，第一个是 unfold, U-N-F-O-L-D, unfold, 表示展示或是表露。例如As the story unfolded, it became clear that the main characters were hiding secrets about themselves. 随着故事展开，越来越清楚主角们隐藏着自己的秘密。第二个是 unpack, U-N-P-A-C-K, unpack, 指打开行李或是从箱中取出。我们可以说 Jessie still hasn't unpacked her bags from her trip. Jessie 回来后还没打开过行李袋。 或者 When I arrived at the hotel, I went to my room and unpacked my suitcase. 当我抵达旅馆时，我进到房间并打开我的行李。
So the title of the next myth is We use only 10% of our brain. And this is an idea that has been floating around. I haven't seen it very recently, but maybe a year or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there were articles and reports about how our brains are actually very powerful and they're capable of doing a lot of things. But unfortunately, we are only using a small percentage of it, which is 10%. And if we were able to use more of it, then human beings would be able to accomplish so much more. So here it says, it's a conceit that has been used as the basis for several science fiction movies. Imagine the amazing things we could do if we could unlock the other 90%.
Yep, so that's a belief that people have. It's a conceit that people have. And of course, they've used this as the basis for several science fiction movies. One I can think of course, was Lucy, which was filmed partly here in Taiwan, starring Morgan Freeman and Scarlett Johansson. And supposedly, yes, she was using more and more of her brain. And as she did that, she got more and more powerful. But that is actually a myth. I remember hearing this when I was a kid, of course. Yeah, we only use 10% of our brain. If we use 15 or 20, then we'll be able to read people's minds. We'll be able to transport our bodies across the universe. Of course, that's all a bunch of science fiction nonsense.
Right, and science fiction here refers to stories that are about imaginary events that happen in the future, events that often involve space travel or life on other planets. So that's science fiction. But the word fiction itself just means a story that isn't based on facts. So fiction is based on imaginary events. And the idea that we only use 10% of our brain is something that has inspired a lot of science fiction movies.
Yep, so imagine the amazing things we could do if we could unlock the other 90%. So if you unlock something, you let it go, you release it. So of course, lots of people say, yeah, we only use 10% of our brains. If we could unlock the remaining 90%, imagine what we could do. But brain scans clearly show that pretty much the entire brain is active, even during basic activities, such as talking and listening to music. So here's where science fact comes in. There have been brain scans conducted of people's brains. If you scan something, of course, you send an electric signal or waves or something into an area in order to get more information from that thing. Of course, you scan your card when you enter the MRT or when you take a bus. We all know what scanning means here, but these are brain scans. They use special kinds of machines that can look inside your brain, and these scans detect activity in all parts of the brain during even basic activities such as talking or listening to music or playing sports or whatever.
Right. So unfortunately, we're not that intelligent. We're not capable of doing that many things because we are using pretty much the entire brain when we are doing basic activities. The only time the brain isn't fully firing is when it has suffered damage. So if the brain has suffered damage, whether it's through a car accident or some other kind of impact, so that it's not functioning fully or correctly, unless that happens, we're using all of our brain. If it's damaged, however, then maybe we are not using all of our brain.
Right, so yeah, when we're talking about firing, that just means it's working because electrical impulses are going from neuron to neuron, so the brain is fully firing, and the time isn't fully firing is when you have suffered some sort of brain damage as the result of an accident or whatever. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Now let's wrap things up with the final paragraph. We'll listen to it first.
Sadly, when it comes to fake body facts, these are just the tip of the iceberg. The next time you hear a fact about the human body, therefore, it might be wise not to take it at face value. Research it for yourself to find out whether it is indeed true or just another spurious invention.
后第三部分我们看到片语 the tip of the iceberg 表示冰山一角，例如Scientists say that discovering the planet is just the tip of the iceberg, and they hope to learn much more about it. 科学家说他们对那颗行星的发现只是冰山一角，他们希望能有更多了解。或是 This protest is just the tip of the iceberg in showing the citizens' unhappiness with their leader. 这场抗议活动只是人民对他们的元首不满的冰山一角。
Now, sadly, when it comes to fake body facts, these are just the tip of the iceberg. So we have talked about 4 body facts, and unfortunately, there are many, many more. So these are just the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg is a huge piece of ice floating in the sea or in the ocean with only its tip that's above the water and can be seen. So when you see a piece of ice above the surface of the water, there might be the rest of the ice underneath that you can't see. So the phrase tip of the iceberg refers to a problem that shows that there are more serious problems that exist, but we just can't see it. And here, the fact that there are so many pieces of misinformation regarding our bodies, and these are only the tip of the iceberg, means there are a lot more that we misunderstand about our bodies.
Right, and there's a lot more to the problem. For example, maybe here in Taiwan, we were suffering from a drought last year, lack of rain and things like that. But a lot of climate scientists say, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. A lot more terrible things are going to happen in the future. Droughts are the least of our problems. But indeed, we're talking about body facts, and there are lots of other ones. So the ones we've discussed here are just the tip of the iceberg. It's just a small sampling of the other myths that are going around regarding the body. Maybe you can think of some yourself and have a discussion about them with your classmates. So here in the next sentence, it says, the next time you hear a fact about the human body, therefore, it might be wise not to take it at face value. So here we've got the phrase, take something at face value, which means believe it the way someone has expressed it to you. Sometimes we have to be skeptical of what we hear, and we have to say, well, I need to do some reading about that. I'm not quite sure that is true.
Right, and sometimes people might not be serious. They tend to joke around a lot. So if somebody like that tells you something, then maybe you shouldn't take it at face value. They don't really mean what they say. Or if somebody says something that might seem mean, like they're criticizing you, but they're just joking, or they weren't really thinking about how their words would affect somebody else, then you shouldn't take those words at face value, because you'll just be annoyed, affected emotionally, and it's not worth it.
And a related term is to take something with a grain of salt. So, for example, if I have a friend whose name is Benny and he's joking all the time, I could say, well, don't believe everything he says. Take what he says with a grain of salt, which means, yeah, maybe you can laugh at what he says, but don't believe him. You'll probably need to do some more research to see if he's telling the truth or not. And the same applies here to myths about the body. If you hear somebody say something about the body, well, take it with a grain of salt, because, you know, it's probably not true, or it might be true, it might not be true. You need to ask around. So research it for yourself to find out whether it is indeed true or just another spurious invention. So yeah, research it for yourself. Do some research yourself, do some reading. You can go online and do some web searches and stuff like that and find out whether it is indeed true or not. I'm sure there are websites that specialize in this sort of things. Do some reading there.
Right, so you need to find out, do your own research to see if a piece of information is true or just another spurious invention. Invention here refers to a story or an excuse that isn't true. So, for instance, I might say, everything that the criminal confessed was pure invention. None of it is true. So everything the criminal said was untrue. It was a lie. And spurious is a word that describes something that is unreasonable. It's obviously not true. It's spurious.
Yeah, it is presented as true, but it's probably false, spurious. I could say, for example, conspiracy theorists are always spreading spurious information. The information they spread is generally false, although it looks like it's true on the surface, okay? And again, it's just probably fiction here. It's probably just made up about the body, although there are probably lots of facts about the human body going around as well. So again, do your research, and that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Let's listen now to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分有一个句子写到 Some scientists calculate that we have 9 senses. Others say 21, still others make it 53. 有些科学家估算我们有9种感官，有些科学家说21种，还有些算出53种。好，当我们用 some others 表示有些怎么样，有些怎么样，这个用法呢是在没有限定范围的人事物里面列举出2种群体状况。我们也可以把 some 和 other 当形容词用，你就用 some 名词other 名词的句型去表达，只不过为了避免重复名词 other 名词呢，常常会用代名词 others 来取代。举例来说 Some people love horror movies while others don't. 有些人爱看恐怖片，而有些人不爱。这时候我们就是用代名词 others 来替代 other people， 以避免重复。另外，如果要在没有限定范围的人事物里面去列举出其中3类，则是用 some others still others 那像我们课文它是用到 some scientists 怎么样， others 怎么样，然后 still others 怎么样，去列举了3类科学家的看法。好，接着读到课文第一部分的最后一句 Whatever definition is used, however, there are definitely more than 5. 然而不论是用哪一种定义，绝对都超过5种。好，句子里面的 whatever 是复合关系形容词，用来强调任何什么什么的。whatever 后面要记得接名词，那当我们用 whatever 加名词再加动词，就可以表达不论什么样的什么什么。举例来说 She can whip up a meal with whatever ingredients are left in the fridge. 她可以用冰箱里剩的任何食材迅速做出一顿饭，所以这边 whatever ingredients 就是任何食材。那这边再补充一下 whatever 的另外2种用法。第一种呢，是指任何什么什么的事物，相当于 anything that。这时候它是用来引导名词子句。例如 You can buy whatever you want. 你可以买任何你想要的东西，想买什么就买什么。例句里面的 whatever you want 就相当于 anything that you want。那它是名词子句，我们把它摆在动词 buy 的后面当它的受词。第二个用法是可以用 whatever 来表达无论怎么样，不管怎么样。这时候相当于 no matter what 是用来引导副词子句，那可以摆在主要子句之前或是之后。举例来说 Whatever she says, don't believe her. 无论她说什么都不要相信她。好，例句里面这个 whatever she says 就相当于 no matter what she says。那这是个副词子句，所以我们这边是用逗号跟主要子句隔开咯。那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Calculate. We need to calculate the chance of success before we decide to take action. Fiction. Many important works of fiction have been written about human nature. Unlock. This course has been designed to help you unlock your potential. Scan. Russell had to undergo a brain scan to determine the extent of the damage. Invention. It wasn't until much later that I realized his story was just an invention.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, did you think any of these myths were true before you read the article?
Well, I used to think that it was possible to make up for my lack of sleep when I didn't sleep enough. So I was surprised to read that actually isn't true, that our bodies don't function that way.
Well, actually, I knew that all of these were myths because we've covered this subject in various lessons before, and I believe I've talked about this in my various classes in the past. So these are some things that are myths, but of course there are many, many others that all of you should check into. Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.